The ANC Youth League has now concluded its 26th elective conference with newly elected leaders. After years of various task teams appointed to rebuild the Youth League and remove divisions, there's finally some kind of formal structure. Collen Malatji has been elected as the president of this league. The president of the mother body, Cyril Ramaphosa, has hailed what he reckons was a successful Congress. For what we should make of this, let's bring in political commentator Sandile Swana, who joins us now via our video link. It's great to have you on the program. Thanks, as always, for making time for the AM report. You know, the league itself has always been criticized for its inability to break away from the politics of the mother body, individuals being linked to leaders at a national level. I wonder whether you reckon they've been able to beat that kind of criticism now with this new leadership cohort.
No, I have my doubts. I have my doubts because, you know, listening to some of the reports, first of all, it appears that there was a Malatji slate and another slate competing, and the Malatji slate got a clean swept, the clean sweep of the votes. And it may have been well supported from their head office in the Tudi House, etc., etc. So obviously there is a need for alignment between the Youth League and the National, but not to individual politicians. So that might still remain a problem going forward.
Yeah, and I suppose then the obvious follow-up question is, to what extent can this league get down with the business of addressing what South Africans or young people in this country are looking to, as opposed to being caught up in what may very well be proxy wars at a national level?
Yes. One of the things that we probably need now are young leaders, including, for instance, the president of the Youth League and the executive itself, who are familiar with what successful youth development and youth leadership is, copying, for instance, from countries such as Singapore, Finland, and others that have produced youth that is well competitive. Our youth, especially in the townships and villages of South Africa, the black youth, is totally not competitive, not even competitive in Africa. So you need people who know what the ideal picture is, not just people who knows the problems, such as the problem of Nyaupe, the problem of excessive HIV infections in South Africa, problems of unemployment. But they need to know what the ideal picture where we need to go to is.
Yeah. You know, the Youth League itself, at some stage, actually did sort of garner a lot of political clout, for lack of a better term. You know, you think of the time when Julius Malema was still there, Floyd Shivambu, and previous years before that. And, you know, part of the questions also being asked now is whether or not that caliber, that vibrancy that used to exist back then can be reimagined now, so that at the very least people look to the Youth League even just for a sense of how we should respond to the country's big questions, right? The unemployment crisis, what we should do about the country's resources, etc., etc. There's that kind of weight, I would say, even on this particular leadership. And the question is, are they up to the task, you know, to live up to the kind of stature of their predecessors, at least those who were there legitimately?
I think that we need some of the comparisons that have been made, the young leaders that have been elected, that they need to rise to the stature of Anton Lembede. What people forget is that Anton Lembede was gathering university degree after university degree, reading and writing articles. He was a thought leader. Now, some of these people, like the president, Malatji, as far as I know, he has yet to complete a 3-year diploma. His first 3-year diploma, he doesn't have it, doesn't have a first 3-year degree. So the intellectual capacities of this elected leadership cannot compare to the Youth League of Mandela and the Youth League of Lembede. The EFF of Floyd Shivambu and Malema recognized after expulsion that they had been swimming in an ocean of ignorance in the ANC, of moral decadence and general failure. So they've uplifted themselves significantly academically and intellectually. And that is where this Youth League needs to start to catch up. They are like people who come to join the Comrades Marathon 2 hours late after the start. So they've got a hell of a hill to climb to catch up with their peers, so to speak.
Yeah. And what does that tell us? I mean, having these people ascend to that leadership position, is it because there's just such a shallow pool of leaders within the Youth League? Or is it because those who do have the ability to lead with those credentials, with that stature, are often overlooked for whatever other reason?
The latter is true. In the ANC, there is no serious effort to actually promote the most well-trained, well-educated, experienced, and credible people. Those who roll in the mud, who can manipulate organizational processes, who can be trusted in manipulating tenders and other things, are the ones who find it easy to prosper in the processes of the ANC. So the leadership of the ANC at this precise point, ANC Youth League, at this precise point in time, do not reflect the cream of the crop of our youth, nor even perhaps the cream of the crop of the youth within the ANC. They are not. They are not the cream of the crop.
You know, part of the question we're asking our viewers to engage us on today is around whether or not they feel this is the right leadership leadership cohort in the organization, etc. And there's an option there for people who feel that youth politics is dead to select. And I wonder to what extent you reckon there's a conversation to be had about that. You know, the fact that having rigorous politics among young people in our country is just such a pipe dream that it just no longer exists. Or do you reckon, that kind of disillusionment is unfair or misplaced?
Yeah, no, that idea is misguided. I think that, our history is not like that. I think even the youth of today, when I say our history is not like that, after the ANC, PAC, and all of them were banned in 1960, people thought that they'd finished this nonsense of the Youth League, which was the Youth League of Mandela, was now in prison, and Sisulu and so on. But in actual fact, in no time at all, people like Sisulu and Biko came up, Banipijana, and so on and so forth. So right up to Tsietsi Mashinini and so on. So even now, what is dead is probably the youth that is 100% affiliated to the failing politics of the ANC. That is why you can see people like Songezo Zibi, Baloyi, and others coming up, even Van Dam, even coming up as young people who are saying there is a new picture that is not tied to those old-timers over there.
Yeah. Speak to us a bit more about that. I mean, do you reckon that if we're going to revive youth politics that exists outside of the existing political organizations, or do you reckon, in fact, there are signs of hope that we can latch onto, people who are pointing us to something a bit more sustainable, something that could grow into something quite real?
Yes, I think that every big change in society starts with the exponential growth of intellectual outputs. I've listened to some of the youngsters in South Africa. I mean, people like Lukhona Mnguni and others. The standard of thinking, the quality of thinking of young people is actually very, very high. So then the rest of them follow those leading lights to say, okay, let's turn this into an organization. Let's turn these ideas into projects and so on. So Cyril Ramaphosa might be thinking that is a thought leader in South Africa, but maybe is already long eclipsed by the likes of Lukhona Mnguni and others.
That's fascinating. During 2016, 2017, during the Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall moment at universities, there were people looking on and saying, it feels like youth activism is back in that space again, the space where there could be a real contestation of ideas, with the hopes, though, that that kind of vibrancy will spill over beyond the borders of universities and start having a material change in society. With the benefit of hindsight, we now know, and I think most people will agree, that that necessarily hasn't happened, at least not to the extent that people would have wished. What role do you reckon universities have to play? I mean, you spoke about how, previous leaders of the ANC Youth League were people who, had degrees, who had very deep, rigorous thought in what they did. And I wonder whether or not we should be able to tie that very easily with universities even today.
Yes, the universities are very, very important. I mean, that's why we went there in the first place, and we were activists at university. But the people that are going to create actual serious change are not the ones who are actually at university. They are the ones who are already working in the media, working in academia, working in think tanks, and so on. That is the group that we are looking at. To actually provide. They are now already outside of universities, but there will be vibrancy in the universities nonetheless. But it is the outputs of our university, the graduates themselves, who are actually going to lead this change.
Yeah. So if then this particular leadership group from the ANC Youth League is to gain the favor of yourselves, perhaps people like me, other young people in this country, what do you reckon then they need to do first in a context where we've already pointed ways through which they fall short, really, at least insofar as people's ambitions are concerned?
The only way any leader, including the leaders of the ANC Youth League, any leader in South Africa, whether you are Steinhazen, no matter whether you are Malema, it's not your degrees only that will win you favor. It's when you go out there and demonstrate capability. For an instance, can the Youth League, and I don't know what their situation is, get their own office to be independent of ESCOM, install whatever alternative power, and demonstrate capability in a place that people have got actual needs? For instance, power is the biggest thing. Can they say, no, we've now inspired and produced 1,000 technicians in the solar space, and so on and so forth? Just do something that makes a real difference in people's lives and say, here is a solution. Whatever criticism, here are our results. Look at them. It's working.
Sobering analysis. Sandile Swana, thanks for speaking to us. Appreciate your time on the AM Report today. Sandile Swana, of course, is a political commentator.